Shwmai a croeso cynnes, and welcome to the What's Your Story podcast. I'm James Owen, a Welsh filmmaker and storyteller, and I'm passionate about sharing stories. This podcast is all about business owners sharing their journey, and we'll be speaking with directors, entrepreneurs and creatives from all across Wales to learn from their experiences. We believe everyone has a story to tell. What's your story? Shwmai and welcome to the next episode of What's Your Story. And I'm very privileged to have a very infamous Swansea figure in the studio today. No, it's not Lee Trundle. It's Kev Johns.
Come on the Jacks.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. Kev is fantastic. He is just amazing at performing, and he's got a big history in performing in theatre. He's a bit of a comic, bit of an MC, compere master. And Kev, for those who don't know you, because I'm telling you, you've got some work to do here in Llanelli.
Really?
Because there's a lot of Turks who don't know who you are.
I don't believe it. I think they know who I am. They may not like who I am. They know who I am, but they just won't admit to knowing a Jack.
Maybe that's what it is. But for those listening and watching, can you just share, what does Kev Johns do in his day-to-day? What do you get up to these days?
Getting up in the morning is a struggle at the moment. My life can be very, very different. You know, I have a ministerial background, and I still get called upon to do some funeral services, so I would do that. But generally, it's hosting events and making promotional videos for different companies, and just doing football events. And just enjoying life, really. If you were to say what you are, I'm just Kev. I love people. So anything I can do that involves working with people and meeting people, I think it's great. And I'm a great observer. I was just watching you now, and the team here. Yeah, Welsh is your first language. I think it's the most beautiful language. Both my children who are now grown up and married, but Welsh is their first language. And I just think it's the most beautiful language. And it gives me great joy to go to places sometimes and hear them, particularly in North Wales, where we lived for some years, and to hear people talking Welsh. I just love to observe people.
Brilliant. Well, just Kev, great to have you coming on. And yeah, there's a big history that I'd love to really get to know your personal story here today. But from a very young age, you've always loved the Swans.
I have. I remember going with my dad, I think I was maybe 7 or 8, to my first Swans game. We went on the North Bank, and then I went home. My mother said, "Did you enjoy?" So I absolutely loved it. I want to go again. And we became season ticket holders in what was known then as the double-decker, which was a wooden stand, one way in, one way out, and everybody seemed to smoke in the stand. So she thought it was safer than being on the North Bank. It really wasn't. But I still remember, the first time I saw John Toshak play, Tosh was playing for Cardiff in a Welsh Cup game against Swansea. So that kind of says how long ago it was. And I just loved it then. And my hero at the time was a lovely guy called Vic Gomersall, who had been at Manchester City. Vic was a left back for the Swans, and I played right back in school football. And he was my hero. And in latter years, I played with Vic in charity games, and we became friends. And he recently passed away. And I was with him the night before he passed away. And the family asked me to take his funeral service. But he was my hero. And Vic was just one of the most amazing guys. And I just love the Swans, and I love the people, you know. I'm not just the players who put on the shirt every week, but the backroom staff, the office staff, the commercial staff. It's become like a family to me, and I love them the bits. And you would have a similar experience in Llanelli with the Scarlets, you know.
I'm on this.
No, it was a game last year, and we were doing pumpkin carving with some of the players in the barn before the game. I didn't stay for the game. I went home, but like the spirit there and the community feel is very similar to what the Swans have. Not just in Swansea, there's loads of Swans fans in Llanelli and Carmarthenshire, but I love to see people support their local team, whatever sport it is. Support your local team.
Yeah, and for me as a rugby fan, it is great to see
Egg chaser.
Egg chaser. It is great to see the rise in football in Wales. And be honest, I think the Welsh Rugby Union, you can take a leaf out of the FAW because I think there's some fantastic work going on in grassroots sports.
I will never forget being in Bordeaux when Wales played their first European Cup game in 2016 against Slovenia. I've never heard the anthem sung like that, and I've been to rugby matches, international games. I have never seen, and it was a bit embarrassing because I started to cry as we were singing, and I thought, oh, no, it's people here I know, Shane Williams was there, Ryan Jones was there, and they were sitting near us, and I turned to them, and everybody else was crying. And it was such an emotional experience. And now, the way they do the anthem at Wales Football Internationals, and they just play na 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 na, and then they cut the music, and the rest all sings it a cappella. And I've never heard anything like it in my life. It is such an experience.
I think there's something about just being Welsh and our identity and singing, and I love it. Yeah, whether you're a rugby match or football match, just to sing the anthem is something really special.
And it is a beautiful anthem. It is an amazing anthem. And if you look at the English translation of the words, which if you're not a Welsh speaker, man alive, it's fire in that place.
Glad. Brilliant. Well, your sort of early days of being a Swans fan has never left, because obviously you do a lot of work in the Swans now. But I want to talk a little bit about your sort of history growing up, and you felt led as a young man who became a Christian at a young age. You felt called to ministry, and you went to Bible college, didn't you?
I did. It wasn't what I planned. I grew up in a part of Swansea called Plasmarl, which overlooks where the stadium is now. And I remember it when it was really one of the biggest industrial waste sites in Europe. Right? It was not a pretty sight to look out of your bedroom window. But I always wanted to be an actor. I always wanted to sing, and I was always singing. I was always performing. And the plan was to maybe go to drama school and train to professionally. But I felt I should go to Bible college. Everybody was surprised. I think God was more surprised than anybody. And I went to London Bible College, which had been Northwood, very posh part of North London, near Wembley, near Harrow. I played rugby there. I played for Pinner. In rugby, in the English divisions, and I just couldn't settle. I was a little homesick, yes, but I still had this desire to perform, and I thought, have I heard God right? Have I made the right decision? So after a year, I was doing what they call the Cambridge University Diploma of Religious Studies. After a year, I decided to come home, and I got a job as a stage manager with Swansea Council in the Party Pavilion. It was like a part-time freelance job, and I did that. And then I went on tour with a singer called Dave Pope, and with Footprints, the Christian Theatre Company. We did a national tour with them, and then I came back and I started performing myself. But I thought, no, you're running away from things. So I went back to do the same course. But I went to Elim's, my own college. I was part of an Elim church. So I went to the Elim College, which was slightly further away from London. It wasn't on the underground. You had to catch an overground from Dorking to get into London. And I thought, this is probably better for me. And I loved my time there. I met my wife there. And after college, I went to Liverpool as a minister. And I was served in a church right by a little seaside resort called Toxteth in Liverpool. It wasn't long after the riots, so Liverpool was kind of rebirthing after the riots. And then I was in a church there trying to rebuild it, which we managed to do, and then went off to Colwyn Bay in North Wales, where I loved. I absolutely loved living there. I used to watch Colwyn Bay in the North West Counties League on a Saturday. And we married there, and my son was born there. And then we came back to Swansea after 3 years, and I had an itinerant evangelism role for Ealing. and it wasn't always financially easy. So I started performing again and doing comedy shows, comedy magic shows, the family shows. And I was an evangelist who who worked as a performer. And then one day I looked at my diary and there was more performing than church work. So it kind of swapped roles. And I'm okay with that, you know. It's maybe not what I planned. And sometimes I look back and I think, should I have done it differently? But it's good, and I get to bring joy. And when I hear those stories, and I'll tell you one later when we get on to the final part of my story, which was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And you put a lot of smiles on people's faces, and I quite like doing that.
It's great. So yeah, you turned evangelist, comedian,
Yeah,
into a comical evangelist.
Yeah, I was doing summer seasons, and we used to do talent shows in Llanelli on the bandstand. And I remember Jessica Garlick, who sang in the Eurovision. She'd be a contestant for that, and we would literally have hundreds of people in the square there in Llanelli once a week doing these live talent shows. And I would do theatre shows, and then I started doing pantomime. And then I remember one pantomime director saying to me, "You should do Shakespeare." I laughed, and I started doing serious drama or comedy drama. Did a play called Toshak or Me. Then I went on tour with the Wales Theatre Company in a musical called Amazing Grace, which was about the 1904 revival written by Mal Pope, and we toured everywhere. And the show sold out at the Wales Millennium Centre, which was for me. When is that going to happen? And I started doing Shakespeare. I think I've done about 6 Shakespeare plays, Dilla Thomas plays, and other comedies. We toured with those. So I kind of got to where maybe the teenage Kev wanted to be, you know?
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, it's great to see that you've had such an impact in our world, because I think for me, when I first started going to church, in fact, growing up, I never went to church growing up as a child, in all honesty. My Magi and Key went to Capel Gymraeg, you know, they'd be canu amynau, singing hymns, there'd be an organ. So my perception of church was one of, it's a boring place to be.
Yeah.
And I found it was the church I went to initially, it was a very fun place. And I'd like to think that, I think God does want us to have a laugh in life.
Yeah, God, if God didn't have a sense of humour, he would have created people, would he, really? Some of the characters. And I had a similar background, you know. I grew up a couple of Nibanwer, Herman Chapel, Meath Road, Plasmarl, and it grieves me really when I look at the area where I grew up, and they were once, and I made a little TV show once about it. There were 7 churches in that area. There's only 1 now. You know, they were a mixture of English language and Welsh language churches and chapels there, and they've all kind of gone, except one English Baptist church, which is you know, small in number but faithful, and it's same with the pubs of Plasmarl as well. Those community places which were very important to us, churches, chapels, pubs, you know. Those pubs have gone. We used to be able to come up. I went to school in the city centre, Dunera School, and you come out of town on the bus, and just as you come out of the city centre, you come towards the Harvard. You stop at the Dublin. It was the pub, but people would ask to go to the Dublin. Then you get the Harvard Inn. Then you get the Mexico Fountain. Then there was another one I can't remember. Then you get to the Coopers. Then you get to the Britannia. Then the Red Cow. Then the Red House, and then the Duke. Those were the bus stops. They were all pubs. But that's how people knew them. They were great community places. And that's all changed. And I find it really, really sad, you know, that we're not the door knocking people. Can I borrow this? Or can you keep an eye on that we used to be? And that was very much part of Welsh culture, very much part of places in England as well, you know. Yeah. But very much part of our culture. And I think it's coming back. I really do.
I think there is obviously a decline in pubs, a decline in churches, but I think, you know, community is very, very important for people and for our own mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
Community is so important. To have a sense of belonging gives you a purpose. and some of these places are key in having that sense of belonging. So, and I think there's an element of, obviously, like if we look at pubs, right, you've got the element of antisocial behaviour, drunkenness, right? But I think it does have a place where, like for me now, I'll be honest, right? I went to a friend of mine was coming back from New Zealand. He's a farmer, and his nickname is Farbor. That's what he was called in school. So I went to catch up with him, have a few beers this bank holiday weekend. And we ended up in a nightclub, right? And it's just, for me, not the scene, right? And in fact, it's called the Red Cow. There's a pub opened there's a nightclub open in Llanelli called the Red Cow. I'm sure it's great for that sort of scene. But for me, I like to go somewhere where the music isn't too loud, that you can have a conversation. And I think there's something nice about, and that could be in a coffee shop, couldn't it? Just something nice about gathering around a table, having a drink, whether it's a coffee or a pint of beer, just to connect.
We are very parochial in Wales. I remember doing a dinner for the Liverpool Rugby Club in the Diplomat, and Shane Williams was the speaker, and this guy came up. I was hosting the event. This guy came up to Shane and said, "Oh, I played against you, but when you were Man United, I played for you for Tumble." And I said, "Oh, you're from Tumble?" He went, "Aye." I said, "Ishaf Lower Tumble?" "Nah, he have." So not only is Tumble different to Pontevedra, and would go to war with Pontevedra, but even in Tumble there's this division: Ishaf or Ichaf, upper or lower. It's the same. I've had the same conversation. I was in making a film in a nursery, flower nursery in Cwmtoch. And somebody who used to listen to me on the radio came up and I had this conversation. I said, "Oh, where you live in Cwmtoch?" I said, "Ishaf." "Nah, Ishaf."
A bit of a word to the
we were in. I was speaking to a family in Portennant in Swansea, Danagrai, and somebody came up in conversation who I hadn't seen for years. And I said, "Oh my goodness, I've not seen them for such a long time. How are they doing?" And they said, "Oh, we don't see them since they moved away." I said, "They moved away? Where are they gone?" "St. Thomas." I said, "I'm not being funny. You go to the top of the road to the left, you're in St. Thomas." "Oh, we don't go that way." And like this division in community, there's people who live at one end of Danagrai Road would never know the people on the other end of Danagrai Road. But that's part of the beauty of Wales, isn't it? We have this sense of belonging to where we're from. Like sometimes people say, "Where are you from?" I wouldn't always say Swansea, I'd say Plasmarl, because that's where I'm from. I know half Plasmarl, half Harvard.
Yeah, brilliant. And you mentioned there about radio, and as a performer, that's been a big part of your life. Yeah. And you've got the record for the second most longest running.
I never knew about this. Radio Today did this list. I started off working at Radio Wales, not for a long time. I had my own show on Radio Wales, which was for me, that was a real joy, and that came to an end, and I just wanted to keep doing radio. So I met a guy from Swansea Sound, and I started doing the show on a Saturday morning. Now, one show became two shows, and two shows became sitting in on cover shows. And then eventually I got the daytime show. And then when the stations split into two, Swansea Sound and The Wave, I took the breakfast show on Swansea Sound, and I did that show for 25 years. And I became the second longest breakfast show presenter in British radio history. And a guy who I know very well called Joe Pantry on Premier Radio in London, he beat me by a couple of months, and then I kind of decided it was time to do something different with my life, and I was getting up every morning 5 o'clock. I lived around the corner from the station. I would drive to the station, even though it was a 5-minute walk, because that meant 5 minutes more in bed, and it was just time, It was time.
Brilliant. It's great to hear that you're doing a bit more now, because I think radio, in fact, we've had a couple of guests who've sort of been involved in that area, in radio, in the media. And there's a bit of local radio coming back. Do you think that's
I do. I do a show on a Sunday, and I love the fact that it goes out to Swansea Bay Radio, but it's the show's also taken by Radio Carmarthenshire, Radio Pembrokeshire, and Bridge FM, which back in the day were the areas that Swansea Sound covered. You know, it wasn't just a Swansea station; it was Pembrokeshire, Carmarthen, just Leslie.
I remember Scarlet
But yes, Scarlet FM, which is part of Radio Carmarthen, you know. So it's lovely to broadcast to all those areas, and I do a Sunday. I think maybe there could be one more show coming out to add to the list, but I'm quite happy doing that, you know, and I'm quite happy that people who live in Cardiff can hear it, and people. But it's just, for me, it's all, most of the content is Swansea content.
Yeah,
And Carmarthenshire.
And Carmarthenshire, of course.
Definitely.
And you do a bit of match announcing at the Swans?
I do, yeah. I've done that for many years. I'm very much involved with the Swans. I look after some of the lounges on hospitality lounges, Trundle and I, on match day, and then around about 2:15 I go downstairs, go Brickside, and you announce the team and anything else that needs to be talked about, and then get the crowd going as the team comes out, and then I do the half time. We have a penalty shootout, and we have a bit of fun on half time, and then I do some post match stuff as well, and which I don't mind doing because the car park takes ages to clear. So I wait, and then so it can be a long day, but I love the people there, and I love the fans. The Swansea City fan base is quite amazing. That we call the Jag Army, and I love the Jag Army. I love the Red Wall, and I love our football.
Brilliant. And over your years of serving in entertainment, whether that be radio, whether that be in theatre production, and also the pantomimes that you're famous for now.
Yeah.
What do you love about performing, Kev?
I love the audience. I tell you what I love about pantomime is that you look out on the audience and you see multi-generations. You see the grandparents, the parents, the children, and the aunties and the uncles come together as a family. They have a tradition. They always come New Year's Eve, Boxing Day, last performance, opening performance, Christmas Eve. They have a day that they always come to. And if you get it right, those youngsters, they are the future theatre audiences. And if they enjoy the panto, then maybe they'll come and see a children's show. They'll come and see Bluey or the Tiger Who Came to Tea or one of those type shows. And then they'll maybe come and see something different. And then as they get older, they'll see something different. And maybe one day they'll be there watching dance. They'll be watching opera. Because as a youngster, I did that. I went to the Grand Theatre in Swansea every week, whatever was on. And I would go watch. I would see opera, see the Welsh National Opera Company. I remember going to see the Northern Ballet, and I saw great names. You know, the great names, big names. Don't tall I base. And saw Clive done there. I saw David Jason long before Del Boy was even thought of.
Wow.
In a play with Hugh Lloyd and Peggy Mountain. If you remember those, you're very old. And then it became a joy to work with people of that nature, you know. I love Stephen Lewis, who played Blakey on the buses, and I'm doing pantomime with him, and then Sophie Lawrence from EastEnders, who became a great friend, and Gillian Tailforth from EastEnders, who became another great friend. And you develop relationships with people when you're with them every single day, more or less, for 7 or 8 weeks, and it's a joy. It breaks your heart then when we lose people. And then I remember walking down the corridor once at the old HTV building in Culver House, and looking for my dressing room door, and there was Roy Castle's name on the door. There was Harry Seacombe's name on the door. Brian Johnson, the cricket commentator's name on the door. And then I saw mine, and I'm sharing. There was Kev Johns, Clive Dunn, who, you know, Corporal Jones from Dad's Army, and I'm sharing the dress with Clive Dunn. You know, and sitting there just listening to his stories. I love the stories, and I'm getting to a point in my life now where I become the storyteller.
Yeah, share it with the youngsters.
Share it with the youngsters. But I love what I do, and I play Dane. That all happened. I did Aladdin, and I played the Emperor of China at the Grand. It was the Millennium Panto. I think I was one of the only people on the poster I'd never heard of, and these masses of people. And
so back then, people didn't know who you were.
Nobody knew who I was. It was, and then it was the night the producer came in, And they come around the dressing rooms, and they eventually got to mine, broom covered, and knocked on the door. And I opened the door, and Paul Elliott said, "Next year, Dame." I just went. What was he on about? And
You didn't apply for that?
no. The next year, I had a phone call from the casting director, and it was Snow White that year, and said, you're gonna play Dame," and I can't play Dame ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many pantomimes have you been in now?
I can never work this out. I've been in panto every. I had unclassified for maths at school. I'll be honest with you, right? And the maths teacher, when he found out I had unclassified, said, "Well done. I didn't think you'd do that good." I also had unclassified for Latin. No Roman soldiers in Cosainan, so I'm all right. And I had one for geography, but I don't care. I got a sat nav. But I've been in panto every year since 1992, except the COVID year, obviously, when there were no shows. So do the math.
Blank it.
And one year I did 2 pantos, so that makes up for the year I missed. So every year since 92.
Well, you've definitely done over 30.
Yeah.
I was born in 95, turning 30 this year.
That's scary, isn't it? That's scary.
It is scary.
So, yeah.
You're not going to attempt to do the
I
maths.
can't, no, I can't.
I'll do it.
I should have
I'll do
really
it for
done
you.
it.
I estimate 32 pantomimes.
No. It's
Or this year will be 32.
no, it's more than that. You could be right.
95, 4, 3, 2, 8, 30.
92 is right there, I swear.
Minus COVID. Yeah, I call that 32.
There we are.
Maybe those listening and watching, they'll comment
Done.
say,
Done.
Kev can't count, James can't count.
Oh, Kev can't count.
Yeah.
Kev can't.
I had an A in GCSE.
Did you?
Yeah. But if I got it wrong, right?
Nice.
Yeah, I did it in Welsh. So if I got it wrong, it's because I did it in Welsh.
Yeah, good boy.
Yeah, I did my gwyddoniaeth a mathemateg and Gymraeg. Yeah. So yeah, it was a strange experience. Yeah, sometimes people will say certain words, phrases in English, talking scientific terms, maths. I'm like, what's that? I don't know what that is. I know the Welsh word, but yeah, a bit of a problem there. But yeah, you've had a massive pantomime's been a massive part of your life.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It has been a massive part of my life, and it's people don't realize how big a thing it is. I signed the next panto now, which is going to be Aladdin. I signed a contract for that before we started rehearsals last year, and in March of this year, I was in London having the photographs taken for the poster and for the leaflets and for the what would be used in press releases, leading up to the panto. Even like the Christmas image, we Joe Pasquale and I were in London having those done in March, and all my costumes are made for me. I have wonderful costumes made by a guy called James McIver, who's from Barry. He's based near Milton Keynes and is a Welsh speaker.
Wow.
From Barry, and he makes all my costumes. He does the Starlight Express costumes in London. He does costumes for the Pattern, the Palladium. Incredibly talented designer, and I'll be up there possibly in the summer for having a fit in, and then the costumes will be made, and they'll try those all on me. So it's a big business, Scripts have been written now, casting is being done now. And people don't realise, when it's big business.
I think I've been the last 3 years, and it's fantastic. Really, really enjoy. I grew up with Denny Tup. Denny Tup in Llanelli would have been the place to go to as a.
Denny's a great performer. I've done a play with Denny. He learns all his lines before you start rehearsal. Yes, really annoying, because I don't. And I remember doing summer seasons with him in the Pattern Pavilion. He was an incredibly funny man. He had a great act as a comedian, as doing the clubs, which is the learning ground for most of us, and a lovely man as well. Yeah.
I want to talk to you a bit about. We spoke a bit offline about Dr. Footlights. So when the lights are on, you perform. And you certainly went through a tough time when you were performing 1 year in the pantomime because you had some unexpected news.
Yeah, the background of the story is I had a blood test, and the results meant I had to have another blood test. Then they sent me for a endoscopy. Then they sent me for a CT scan. The day after the CT scan, I had a phone call, withheld number, with a call set down. I'll have a hello, my name is Jemima. We know it's not Jemima.
Oh, Alan.
Alan, you're not Alan, all right? And does your mother know you do this for a living? She'd be ashamed of you. That's what was my response.
Yeah.
But it was the doctor who sent me for the scan. And she said, we've had your scan results and I knew you were worried. So I wanted to ring you and tell you. I was fine with that. I thought, that's kind of it. And then she said, words I'll never forget. Are you on your own? I said, no, my wife's downstairs. She said, give her a shout. And I called Rosie up. And she said that they found something sinister. There was a tumour on my kidney. And they, from what they could see, it was cancer. But I needed to have biopsies. I went for my biopsies. They stab you in the side, you know, and say, do you want to see it? No, I don't want to see it. Keep it here. Keep it. Let me have a quick look. It's a camera. I'm a performer. I will be seen. And 3 days after the biopsy, I was in a field in North Wales filming an episode of an American comedy show written by the guys who wrote Saturday Night Live. It was probably the biggest job I'd ever had.
Wow.
And then I came back. I saw the oncologist who said that I had cancer. They couldn't do anything with it. They would treat it, they would manage it, but they couldn't cure it. They couldn't do surgery because I had secondaries on my lungs. So if you have those, that's what makes it stage 4. It was a stage 4 cancer. And I didn't know nothing about stages, you know. There's no stage 5, this is stage 0. And but they would treat me. She was very positive. The only negativity I'd faced was I'd gone to see a GP about whether we wanted the GP involved in the process. And I called to see a GP who I'd never seen before, and looked at my notes and said, well, what you need to do now, Mr. Johns, is go home and prepare your family to sign a do not resuscitate order. And I know what that means, but I found myself saying, what does that mean? And she said, well, if you have a heart attack, there'll be no flashing lights, no sirens, we'll just let you go. To which I replied, I ain't going anywhere. And I went. I said, thank you for your time. And I just left. And so the first of those pantos that you would have seen, you've seen the 3 digital pantos at the Grand with the Magic, which are amazing, a digital set. I did that with cancer. And I was having treatment during rehearsals, and on a day off from panto, I would go to Singleton to have my monthly treatment. And I felt bad. I was carrying a lot of weight. I eventually lost 7 stone. I lost too much, so I put a stone a bit back on. But I was really, you know, but when you walk out onto that stage and the audience are expecting and the lights come on, you don't feel ill. You just, the adrenaline, whatever, Dr. Footlights we call it, and gets you through. And
where does that saying come from, Dr. Footlights?
well, the footlights are the lights at the base of the stage, and it's, you know, when the lights go on, it makes you feel fine. You forget everything, and you go, and it's true. The audience, they that's not that they don't care, but they paid a lot of money. They want to see you at your best, which is why I get very angry. And I've seen people do it. Some very well-known people do it. Walk the show, you know, and not really put their effort into it. And I remember an old director saying to me, you know, sometimes people like to mess about on the last performance. Maybe your last performance, but it's their first performance, and do it for them. And there were some people not a lot of people in the company knew I had cancer. Some of the staff at the Grand knew.
So Beauty and the Beast was
Beauty and the Beast, yeah.
I was there,
Yeah.
and I seen you very close because I was in like the 2nd, 3rd row. I wouldn't have had no clue you were battling cancer at the time.
Yeah, I would come off stage. I'd have to sit down. There were chairs the people who knew, there were chairs, and most of my costume changes are done in the wings anyway. There are 2 quick change areas, and there were chairs for me and bottles of water wherever I needed to be. And but then by the next year, Cinderella, I'd had the surgery because the treatment cleared my secondaries. So I was able to have surgery, and that's incredible. You know, the health service. We have an amazing health service in this area. For me, it was the Swansea Bay University Health Authority. Completely over different one, but they're great. And but the South Wales Cancer Centre covers everyone. It covers from Pembrokeshire up to Aberystwyth, up to Bridgend. You know, it covers a lot of the area. And I went in on a Friday morning. They operated Friday afternoon. I was back at the house Sunday afternoon, and I would have been back in the house Sunday morning if I peed, but they wouldn't let me out until I peed. And as you know, you cannot just tell a man to pee. Tell a cameraman you can't do it, can you? You cannot do it in your own time when they give you this cardboard bottle. I'm sorry, no. But I eventually did, and I went home, and I was gonna get my wife to take a photograph of me coming out of the hospital. I was going to put up on social media. I'm sure I've forgotten something. She said, "Don't you dare do that! Don't you dare do that!" And it was
because your kidney came out.
Yeah, yeah. And I went public then. Just once I'd had the surgery, and I was by accident. I was doing a Swans fans forum, and that year the Swans charity was Maggie's. So the third shirt, the pink shirt, was a Maggie shirt, and somebody, the last question of the forum from a fan was, "I'd like to congratulate the Swans for doing that." And I tied up by saying I'd never been so proud of my football club as when they did that. And then I told my story that night. I said, I just had, the operation, which suggests I'm all clear. And, I still have treatment. There's no signs of the cancer returning. I still have monthly treatment, 3 monthly scans and monthly blood tests. And I wish I didn't have to have those anymore. But they say I do. And so it's 3 years it came into my life. And I've met so many people. And sometimes I wonder, was it for a purpose? There was a lady, I was there one day, and it was quite funny because there was a gentleman, there were 6 chairs in the treatment in the chemotherapy day unit. I was on the immunotherapy, but it's the chemotherapy day unit. There was a gentleman sitting opposite me. Then there were 3 ladies. And there's an older fella next to me. He was gone. He was fast asleep, snoring. He was really funny. 3 ladies were talking, and the guy across was on his phone. Next thing, my phone binned, and he just started following me on Instagram, which is really funny.
He was next to you.
He was the one across, yeah. But then one of the ladies, it was our first visit, and your first visit there is very traumatic because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't, and it's not that. It's not a negative place. There's a lot of smiles there as well. But this dear lady was having a cold cap put on, and I know what a cold cap is for, but I don't know the experience obviously because I didn't have chemo. And after a little while, she was very uncomfortable, and she started to cry, and she said to the staff, "Take it off, please take it off. I'll get my haircut." And then she looked at me and she said, "Kev," she said, "I'm sorry you had to see that." I said, "Don't be soft," I said, "Don't be dull." I said, "But if you're finished with the girl doing the hair, if you could send it over to me, I need a few highlights." And she laughed. She started laughing. And then a couple of days later, I was sitting in IKEA. Cardiff City must have been away because that's the only time I can go to Cardiff. Not popular. And I was sitting in IKEA, and my phone buzzed, and I looked up, and there's somebody sent me a message through Messenger, and there was this lady saying, just to say thank you, you brought laughter into a very dark place. And I've seen her since. She's fine, she's great, and she still tells the story. And I'm thinking, well, maybe that's why I was there. Maybe that's why I was there that day, to make a difference to that lady's life. And I'm not someone who finds laughter in every situation. For goodness sake, you can't do that. But if you can use humor to bring a smile, to change your life, to make it better, even just for a little while, then they will do that. We'll do that. And we're living in tough times, you know. There's war in Europe. There's anger, a lot of aggression in some of our politicians, and people need to be lifted. They need to be lifted. And as a comic, as somebody with a sense of humor, as a Christian, if we can just make a difference. You know, I used to, when I started singing, my singing teacher used to have sing a song. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living will not be in vain. Is it os gallai helpu rywun?
Yeah.
I used to sing it in the Welsh version as well. But if we can help somebody as we pass along, then our living will not be in vain.
That's a brilliant. Is that a song, a hymn?
Yeah. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain.
That's a great thing to live by, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's not all about good works. There's a lot more to life than that, yeah, as we know. But for goodness sake, and it gives me great joy now. When we had the church in Colwyn Bay, it was in the early 80s, we had a luncheon club for the elderly in the community. We had an early part of a food bank, which basically meant if somebody needed food, then we go and buy them. We go shopping with them. But some of the things we were doing then, which I picked up from my time on the in Merseyside, then it's great to see churches now. Most of the food banks in this country are run by churches, and it's good to see that they're not just opening on a Sunday, that they're opening, you know, every single day and making a difference to the communities that they serve.
It's serving people, isn't it? It's serving the need.
It is. You know, and that's why disciples were chosen in the book of Acts, and because the guys who had been disciples had become apostles and were tied down doing a certain thing, and they needed someone to feed the widows, the orphans, the children. So that's why disciples, deacons, were put in place, is to feed people, not to sit around in the sidfrawr on a Sunday looking important, but to get out there, get your hands dirty and do something in the community.
Just very in line with my preach this Sunday.
Good boy.
I'm actually preaching on Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And before he went to the cross, that's one of the very last things he did on this earth, was to wash his disciples' feet. And for me, that's a great picture of humility and how we should all be. No matter if you're the Prime Minister, the King, the leader of the council, or whatever that may be, we are no better than the person next to us. And we should love people how we want to be treated, and to serve others, whether it's helping somebody out financially, food, and all those things. We're called to help one another, aren't we?
And the very last thing he did was promise a man who had done nothing to deserve it other than express faith with his very last breath, was to tell him, you're coming to heaven with me. Now, can you imagine that in Wales? I don't think so. I knew his mother. No wonder he ended up the way he did. Shocking she was, shocking. She didn't know what she was like, And he hadn't done Alpha course. He hadn't been baptised. He hadn't got a little envelope with his number on it so he could put his collection in, and everybody in the church knew how much they were giving on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And that day he walked into heaven with Jesus. And I could imagine the angels saying, whoa, hang on, son. What are you doing here? I don't know. Well,
I'm with him.
I'm with him.
Yeah.
I'm with him. Ask him. He brought me. Whoa.
Yeah. What a great close to our conversation.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we're called to be the light in the darkness. And if you, Kev Johns, are that person through bringing your light through some humour into the darkness of Wales, then cer amdani, gadw fynd, keep going. I really enjoy that. I've really loved this conversation. And just before we close, I'd love to ask you, this is something we ask all our guests, because we're all about hearing personal stories. If you could sit here and listen to somebody's story, and that could be somebody that is around now, that could be maybe somebody fictional or somebody you never got to meet, who in your life would be a great inspiration, a big influence, that maybe you'd just love to get half an hour sitting down in front of them and hearing their personal story? Who might that be, Kev?
First of all, everybody has a story.
They do.
Make your story a good one.
Every seat has a story.
Yeah. But for me, there was an English teacher and a deputy headmaster at my school, Dynevor School in Swansea, who obviously is no longer with us, called Ozzy Morris. And I had some difficult years in what would now be year 9, 10 and 11. And Ozzy always saw potential in me. He was the one who got me involved in doing charity work and community work. And he made a difference in my life. And I would love to know more about Mr. Morris and how he became the incredible teacher that he became.
Fantastic. Role models, so important in young people.
Role models, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you to Mr. Morris, who brought you. Kev, I've really enjoyed having you on the podcast today. We've gotten to hear a lot about your personal story. Been very vulnerable to share that. If anyone wants to know more about you, if they want to book you for an event,
just come and say hello, man. Down at football, stage doors. Just come and say hello, and we'll have a chat.
Brilliant. Diolch, Kev.
Croeso.